Hey, what's up guys, it's Bran again, and welcome back to another video in our heavily touted Evil Dead week, which is in honor of Evil Dead Burn, which is coming out in only a few days as of you're watching this. So I am very excited to get talking about the next movie in the revamped Evil Dead trilogy, the second movie, which is Evil Dead Rise. Now, Evil Dead Rise was made 10 years after the original revamped OG Evil Dead movie came out and takes place in the same world, although in a different part of the world. Now, something to sort of wrap your head around and sort of perhaps gain context to the actual movie and how it connects to the other movies is that it was stated very clearly by the creators of the revamped Evil Dead universe that there are actually multiple Necronomicons or Book of the Dead in that Earth. There's about 3, if I'm not mistaken. One of them is in the Evil Dead remake. The other one is in Evil Dead Rise, which we are talking about today. And then the other one, the last one, probably is in Evil Dead Burn. And so I'm super excited to sort of share my thoughts on this movie and give you a little recap of what this movie is all about. So yeah, stick around and hopefully we have a good time. So, to recap the movie based on my vague memory of watching it of a little over an hour ago, is that it starts off with this insane cabin sequence in which a group of 3 people are playing in this lakeshore lodge, and these 2 people basically talk about their sister or cousin or their friend, whatever it is, I forget. But basically, this girl inside the log cabin that they said was very ill from something that had happened. Obviously, we know this is the Deadite stuff. She's like a Deadite now, but unbeknownst to these characters, they play it off as if, oh, she got sick or something. And so the girl character goes inside the log cabin and basically confronts the sister, I believe, and basically saying like, hey, like, you okay? Like, let me read you a bedtime story, or let me read the bedtime story, or I don't remember, man. But she basically reads a book, and then her sister rises up and basically recites the book, even though she doesn't read it. And she's like, "What the heck? You're freaking me out, bro." She falls and collapses on the ground, and as the sister goes to investigate, she turns around and she's like foaming from the mouth, and the sister's like, oh my gosh, I need to get help, and while she's helping her sister chokes her out and then basically takes her ponytail and literally sculpts her, which is kind of crazy, right? And then we cut back to that guy who's still on the next to the lake, and he's playing with his little drone thing. The girl comes up, who got scalped, trying to come to him for help, but he's like, I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to do, bro, this is crazy. And she's like, help me, and he's like, oh my gosh. He turns that way and he sees the Deadite right over there, and basically the Deadite takes the drone that he's playing with and then cuts her own face off with it, jumps into the lake, and the guy is like, what the heck is going on? Tries to save her by jumping into the lake, only for him to get ripped up Jaws style, head lobbed over, Steph Curry shotted into the dock, landing perfectly. And as she's rising up, aura farming, as the title card reveals, Evil Dead Rise. Bro, that's crazy. The Deadites have learned how to aura farm. And we cut actually to an earlier moment, so this is actually a few days before this happens, which is very interesting from like a structural standpoint, and I'll get into more of that later, so stick around. But basically cut back to our main character. Let me search up her name. Loki, I always forget. Beth. So Beth is this guitar technician who travels around with bands and lives a very, even though she doesn't like to be called a groupie, a very fast and loose lifestyle, if you know what I'm saying. And so she reads a pregnancy test during one of her gigs, and it says positive, and she's like, oh fuck, and so to seek comfort, she goes to her sister, Ellie, and basically goes to her family, trying to seek refuge, trying to seek an answer of some sort. And when she actually arrives at the apartment complex where Ellie is, the family's already going through some troubles. So Ellie and her family of 3 kids are in this odd situation where Ellie's ex-husband is now living away from them, recently divorced, recently left, right? We don't exactly know the exact circumstances of why he left, but we just know that, he, at least from what we assume, he's a little bit irresponsible, and instead of spending time with his children, he rather just pay the child support that he is legally required to pay. And so that's the situation she's walking into. The other kids are just kind of there, to be honest. Character wise, like the eldest daughter is like, I don't know, this activist, which doesn't really come into play into the movie. The eldest son is like a DJ or an aspiring DJ, so he eventually like gets some vinyls that I'll talk about later. And the youngest one is sort of an oddball, which cool, I guess. But the kids' characters aren't really that important. And I don't know. I keep saying I'll talk about it more later, but I just want to recap the plot first. So bear with me, okay? After all the characters are introduced, there's some drama between Beth and her sister Ellie, because it's established that Ellie is the older sister that always fixes the younger sister's mess. But when it comes to the opposite, when elder sister needs help, younger sister is nowhere to be found. Like, for example, when they first split off about 2 months ago, Ellie called her twice. The first time when bad things were starting, and the second time when he was leaving. And and Beth didn't pick up the call, which she was like, what's going on? Which we assume is because of her fast-paced lifestyle. She didn't pick up on it. And so they have that little bit of clash, but it really leads nowhere. I guess it serves as like step into the shoes of a realistic family with problems, which I do like. But they just sort of brush past that as an earthquake happens, and basically the whole building rumbles, and a hole in the garage tumbles down, revealing this vault inside or underneath the apartment complex, because the apartment complex was actually built atop a bank, an old bank. And so the kid Danny, the eldest son, goes down there and is like, well, let me sift through here. Maybe there's some stuff that our mom can use, because they're in a tight financial situation right now. And so they literally go and search around, and they see this huge tomb, or this huge like stone coffin, and this guy's like, oh, let me push the coffin and let me look inside, and lo and behold, there is the Necronomicon. He takes a Necronomicon upstairs, as well as some vinyl records to go with it. So he got both a book and some sick records to play. Awesome. And so, eventually he plays this record, and as Ellie is going downstairs to do the laundry, we get to the Deadite craziness. So, the first person POV spirit shot from every single Evil Dead movie plays, and Kona kind of goes in and then hits Ellie right in the elevator. Boom, hits her like, oh, like that, and everything. And she basically gets tied up, which is, a callback to 2013 Evil Dead's, as well as the OG Evil Dead's branch scene, but in a much more, a friendlier way. Like I mentioned in the last video, I didn't like how it was portrayed because it served no narrative purpose. Evil Dead isn't exactly a psychosexual movie, which would be an interesting concept to touch on, but that's not this movie at all either. So I'm glad they didn't go with that again. And so as she gets possessed, she goes upstairs, goes back into the room, and the family is freaking out. She's like tossing eggs in a pan, and she's like having the shells in the pan, kind of showing that she is not in the right state of mind. And she turns and she gives one last plea to Beth, her younger sister, to please save her babies, save her kids. And from there, crazy stuff happens. Ellie goes wild, she dies, she pukes on the floor, and as they lay her to rest, thinking that she's dead, which obviously she isn't, two of the people hatch a plan because the elevator is broken. I forgot to mention that. Elevator's broken, so they hatch a plan to go down the fire escape, which is in this old room that they need to break into. And so while they're breaking into it, Ellie revives. She gets like a high fever, and so they're like, all right, let's just push her into the bathtub. They push her into the bathtub, and I know I've said this is where the craziness started, but this is really where the craziness started. And so she goes up into the ceiling on all fours and basically starts contorting and acting crazy and weird in front of the kids, and basically attacks Beth with a glass shard. And reminiscent of Resident Evil 7, she goes right through the hand with the glass shard of Beth. And the eldest daughter is like, stop. And then Ellie's like, haha, like, I'm gonna troll you. And she jumps onto the eldest daughter, grabs a tattoo gun, and goes crazy on her face. But they get to push her off, and then the guy who was opening the vacant door comes back and is like, hey, we kind of figured it out. And then Ellie jumps on him like Foxy jump scares, jumps on him like that. And then they basically get pushed out of their apartment, thank goodness, and they close the door, barricade it, while some tragedy is happening outside their doorstep. And you're seeing all of this through a tiny peephole, which I really do like. I really do like that shot. As this nastiness is happening outside, and as Ellie's absolutely destroying everyone, even the old man with the shotgun. Bad stuff is happening on the inside of the apartment because their mom just turned into this crazy psycho freak, right? And so they try to figure out what's going on, try to consult, like, what, I think it's the Necronomicon that does this. But as they're doing this, the eldest daughter starts puking out of every orifice this black liquid. And so she is turning into a deadite. And eventually she fully turns into a deadite, and she's chomping on a wine glass, and swallowing the glass pieces, which no, bro. Like, you can literally see the glass shard going down her throat, like, and you're like, oh. And basically, she jumps on the eldest son. And then as the chaos is happening on the inside, as they try to deal with the eldest daughter, Ellie jumps into the vents. She vents like in Among Us, and then basically breaks into the house again. And then, they're tag teaming the whole family and stuff like that. Danny eventually dies, just straight up dies. Doesn't turn into a deadite at that current moment. And eventually, Beth, like, as she's getting strangled by Ellie, she yanks a pair of scissors into her face. And as she's staggered, she runs away with the youngest daughter, and they go into the hallway down the elevator. And while all the deadites that have revived, all those dead bodies that got absolutely massacred by Ellie, revive and start chanting, like, basically cheerleading. And as they go down the elevator, right, a pool of blood starts to rise in the elevator, like something out of The Shining, which is a crazy reference to do, but I respect it. It's still kind of crazy for me. I don't know how I feel about it, because it's not necessarily like the It doesn't carry the narrative weight like it does in The Shining when the elevator of blood pops out. But as they're going down the elevator and as they're almost drowning in that pool of elevator blood, um, all of the Deadites start crawling into each other and forming, I believe, what's called the Marauder Deadite, which is this Deadite that is composed of multiple bodies forming this grotesque family unit all in one. And so, as they're going down the elevator finally opens after a struggle, and they're shining shot, basically, but them flowing out as well. And so they rush to their minivan, start up the car, when they see the Marauder right behind them. And I love this sequence. They play this cat and mouse sequence very perfectly, and the horror protagonists in this film aren't exactly super dumb. They're a little dumb at times, but all of their actions make sense. They ditch the car because the car isn't carring, and so they sneak around the other side, and while the Marauder is looking for them, they ensue some hijinks, some looking under the car type of stuff. And then they make it to a confrontation between the Marauder, where Beth tries to shoot the Marauder, going after the little youngest daughter, and eventually going after Beth as well. But Beth gets trapped in between the Marauder and this wood chipper, which leads the youngest daughter to turn on and off the wood chipper, while Beth finally has a chance, finds a chainsaw, and chainsaws the Marauder into the wood chipper, ending it permanently. And so after that, they escape, and that's that. And that lady from the beginning of the movie who was tweaking out in that log cabin comes in, doesn't notices the carnage that's happening around, and gets infected by the dead-eyed ghost that's floating around, because it's still around, I guess. And that is the movie. Now, what exactly do I think about Evil Dead Rise? I think I actually enjoyed it more, but not for the reasons you expect, than 2013's Evil Dead. Now, let me explain why. I actually like Evil Dead 2013's plot a little bit better than Evil Dead Rise, because the plot in Evil Dead 2013, even though it was still a little bit underbaked, a lot of the characters in that movie and the character motivations played into the ending of the movie itself. While this movie, even though the start is more engaging, than the start of 2013's Evil Dead, the beginning, the interesting family dynamics between Ellie and Beth kind of get watered down as the conflicts start. Yes, they make some jabs at each other, saying like, oh, you and your unborn baby will meet Ellie in hell, or like, I don't know, like her saying, I'm not a fucking groupie, That's cool and all, but it doesn't really play into the ideas and perhaps the fears of becoming, okay, let me get this straight. I think a great theme that they could have utilized in this film more effectively is motherhood. Ellie, who is a mother of 3 kids, and Beth, who is about to be a mother to this unborn child of hers. And I feel like that fear of having a child would play so well into the movie, and yet they don't really do anything with it, which I find very disappointing. And so I feel like that's something that they definitely could have touched on a lot more in this movie, and they don't. And that's why the story of this, even though the start is so strong with all the family dynamics shown throughout the movie, it kind of falters at the end, because at the end it just turns into another Evil Dead movie where there's a final girl, or this time final girls, and they escape. And what does that tell us about their family dynamic? I don't really know. While in 2013's Evil Dead, the brother's sacrifice makes it, that the beginning of the movie where he says, I will only do what I need to do for my sister, really plays into it, right? And her being the final girl, sort of getting over this demon called drug addiction, really plays into and parallels her fight against this deadite threat. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I think. I think that the plot is overall better in 2013's. I enjoyed 2013's more. And despite that, I still enjoy this movie very much so. I still feel like a lot of the jump scares were good. A lot of the scare sequences were very tense. Again, I love that hallway sequence. I love sequences where part of the horror is obscured and isn't shown to us, because truly our imagination is scarier than anything that the screen can show us. So I love that part. A lot of the acting I feel like was way better than 2013's Evil Dead. All of these characters felt grounded, maybe a little boring, but all of the actions were very grounded and very nice. I really liked the performances in this. Cinematography was always good, as is in every Evil Dead movie, and the sound design, oh my goodness, very good. And if you're a fan of the gore, you will not miss that as well. There's a lot of gore-tastic moments in this movie, and that's almost to be expected now for Evil Dead movies. I think another standout thing is how they tackle, and they continue this throughout the revamped Evil Dead trilogy, is the almost dramatically jovial performances of these Deadites. I really like how, even though in this revamped Evil Dead trilogy there's a very dark and grimy seriousness to them, they still have fun with their victims. They still have fun with, it's clear that these Deadites are doing it for the love of the game and not for some dark inherent purposes. They just love torturing people, and I like that about the antagonists of this film. Very cool stuff. But yeah, apart from that, let me get into the negatives. As I said before, the plot could use a little bit of work, especially on the end, because the very first half was very good, very, very good. I feel very engaging and very gets you sympathetic towards this family that is going to encounter so much hardship later on. Another thing that I thought was a little bit lacking was the Marauder. I felt like as a creature design, I can appreciate it, but I felt like it was a little not as scary as I thought it'd be. Like, I recently just watched The Thing as well, the same day actually as I rewatched Evil Dead Rise. And when I watched The Thing, that sort of body horror character design was much better than, I guess, the Marauder, which was just, 3 heads, 3 people in one body type thing. Not to say that it isn't scary, but compared to Evil Dead's 2013 and other creature designs I've seen, it's a little bit mid, I got to be honest. Oh, another negative that I saw was the characters of the children being underbaked. These children are supposed to be people that we really feel sympathetic towards, and we feel their pain every time we lose one of them. But instead, because they don't have much character built into them, it kind of makes the potential impact less than what it actually could be. And so I felt like they really missed their mark on that as well. Apart from that, I don't really know what else to talk about. Apart from that, I felt like this was a very solid movie otherwise. There's a few nitpicks, and obviously the plot is a little bit lacking, but overall, I felt like it was a fun time. Evil Dead Rise is definitely a recommend in my book, and you guys should go watch it. But yeah, those are all the negatives, and honestly, all the thoughts that I have about this movie. What do you guys think about Evil Dead Rise, and are you guys excited to watch Evil Dead Burn? I think literally today. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna watch it tomorrow, so it is what it is. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe down below, and as always, leave a comment if you want to talk about anything. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're getting to 100 subscribers, hopefully by the end of this month, maybe. Teehee. I don't know. But yeah, Evil Dead Rise, Evil Dead Burn review coming soon. Bye bye.